This is the first image from Disney's upcoming animated feature, Strange World. And now that we're done talking about Bruno, I think it's about time we start talking about this. So today I'm breaking down everything we know about the film so far and telling you exactly what you should expect from Disney's Strange World. Alright, so let's start off with the basics. Strange World is going to be the 61st film in the Disney Animated Canon. And in short, the Disney Animated Canon are all of the theatrically released animated feature films made specifically by the Walt Disney Animation Studios. And what that exactly means is probably a topic for another day.
Probably.
But what is Strange World and what is it about? Well, the synopsis reads: the original action-adventure journeys deep into an uncharted and treacherous land where fantastical creatures await the legendary Clades, a family of explorers whose differences threaten to topple their latest and by far most crucial mission. So, as the synopsis says, the film will center around a family called the Clades, whom we can pretty much assume to be the two characters we see in the concept art. The main character will be a 14-year-old boy named Ethan Clade, and we also know about one other member of the Clade family named Meridian. If we do assume that Ethan and Meridian are the two characters we see in the concept art, my guess is that Meridian is Ethan's dad. But I guess he could also be an older brother or perhaps even an uncle. But we'll get back to that one later. The only other character we know about is Captain Calypso Khan, whom isn't even in the concept art and we don't really know much about. Now that is basically all of the info we have about the plot of the film. But I do of course have a few theories as to what we might expect. If we simply take a look at the title font for this film, it seems pretty clear that this film is probably going to take some inspiration from the Indiana Jones films. I mean, if you look at these two titles next to each other, it seems pretty obvious that this is an intentional reference. But that to me is really exciting. The Indiana Jones trilogy was some of my favorite films when I grew up. And yes, I know that it's technically not a trilogy anymore, but please just let me keep pretending that Kingdom of the Crystal Skull was a bad dream. Anyways, if we take a closer look at the image from earlier, I feel like the landscape that the two Clades are looking at reminds me a little bit of Pandora from James Cameron's Avatar. The animals that we see on the ground also remind me a bit of some of the animals from Avatar, but the whole thing also kind of looks like a giant coral reef. However, there is one story that I think Strange World is going to draw a lot of inspiration from, and that is Journey to the Center of the Earth by Jules Verne. Journey to the Center of the Earth is a novel first published in 1864, and like many of Jules Verne's other novels, it is a science fiction adventure. The book centers around a young man named Axel and his eccentric uncle, Professor Otto Lidenbrock. Professor Lidenbrock discovers an old text which leads him to believe that there are a series of volcanic tunnels on Iceland, which leads to, as you might have guessed, the center of the Earth. They hire an Icelandic guy named Hans to be their guide, and then they begin their treacherous journey into the globe. So, just to recap real quick, we have a party of 3 people, 2 of whom are related, and the third who functions as a guide on their adventure. That sounds a lot like Ethan Clade, Meridian Clade, and Captain Calypso Khan, if you ask me. But I've got more. On their journey to the center of the Earth, Axel and Professor Lidenbrock at one point find themselves in a forest of gigantic mushrooms, which very well could be what we see in the concept art for Strange World as well. And as if that wasn't enough, in Journey to the Center of the Earth, they also encounter a number of fantastical creatures which were assumed to be extinct or pure fantasy. And what do we see in the concept art? Bam! Now, in the book, there are a few times where we see Axel and his uncle disagree and argue with each other. That is mainly because Axel actually doesn't even want to be on the journey in the first place, but also just because they're alone in these terribly dark tunnels for such a long time. They really push themselves both physically and mentally, so they get frustrated and they start taking it out on each other. And I can really see Disney playing up this element. You know, Disney obviously often make films about family relationships. I mean, just recently we've seen Encanto and Turning Red and Onward. And I know those last two are technically Pixar films, but still, Disney is obviously big on the family stories. That's also why I think it's more likely that Meridian is Ethan's dad than his brother. Because if they're brothers, the film might end up feeling a lot like Onward. But as I mentioned, if they do take inspiration from Journey to the Center of the Earth, Meridian could also be Ethan's uncle. But in that case, he could still function as a sort of father figure for Ethan. But those are my predictions for Disney's Strange World. The film is being directed by Don Hall, who also was one of the directors on Raya and the Last Dragon, and it is set to be released in November of this year. But tell me, did this get you excited for Strange World? Do you have any other theories as to what we might see in the film? Let me know in the comments down below. And I'm pretty sure I'll be back with another video about Strange World once we get some more information. So if you want to make sure that you don't miss that, then feel free to smash that subscribe button. But that's pretty much all I had for you today. My name is Martin Riise. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, take care and so long.